So if you watch the Getting Started with Node-RED video, you'll know now how to enable Node-RED on the SmartSwarm 341, and you'll know the basics of creating a flow and deploying it to the gateway. What we're going to look at in this video is how to start doing something a bit more useful as we go along. We're going to show you how to extract data from a flow and get specific data fields that may be of interest to you. And we're going to show you how to put those up onto a local dashboard that's served by the SmartSwarm 341 so you can get some local view on the process that you're monitoring or the asset that you're monitoring. I've got the same setup that I had in that first video. I've got a SmartSwarm 341. It's connected via its ETH0 port and an Ethernet cable straight into my PC. ETH0 is acting as the DHCP master. The gateway is appearing at IP address 192.168.1.1, and I've got a browser open on my PC that's basically showing me those addresses. You'll notice I've got a couple of extra tabs open this time, and we'll go into what those are for later on. So let's get started. If you remember, this is where we ended up at the end of the last video. We've got some information that's coming in from wizard nodes. We've changed our subscription so that we're only looking at the data packets that come from those nodes, not any of the configuration or diagnostics information. And we're just putting that out into a debug node so we can see it on the screen here. I'm going to stop this screen updating by hitting this tab on the debug node. That basically means now that debug node is not going to pass anything through to this screen. It just stops it scrolling around so we can look at some stuff. And what I want to show you is basically this line here. This is the topic of the information coming through, B&B / the ID of the device that's creating the data and data. But the interesting thing that I want you to see here is that it's coming across as a string. So even though this information is formatted as JSON data, in terms of what Node-RED's seeing, it thinks that's a string. And for it to be able to be operated on, we need to turn that into an object so that we can parse it and actually understand what the JSON fields mean. So the way we do that is with this JSON node. It appears a little bit down the palette in the function section, and we pull that through, wire it across, and let's put another debug node on so we can see what's going on. Having done that, I'm going to deploy this to the gateway. I'm going to clear out the debug stuff that was there before, and I'm going to put this back switched on. So now you'll see that messages are appearing in pairs, and if I stop both of those, we can look at what's going on. So the first thing you'll remember last time I told you is you're hovering over this, the debug nodes contributing the information get highlighted. In the last demo that wasn't very impressive because we only had one of them, so it was always the same one, but now you can see where the messages are coming from as we go down. I don't know why I did that. Okay, next thing is if we look at this, this was our original message. This is what we were seeing last time we looked. We've got the information coming through as a string with the payload data. But if I go down one to the information that's now coming out the back of this JSON node here, you'll see we've fundamentally got the same data in the payload, but now Node-RED is treating it as an object. So now this is a parsable JSON object that we can actually do something with. So what we're going to do is we're going to extract some of the information from these fields and we're going to throw it up onto a dashboard so we can actually start to visualize what's going on. To do that, I'm going to use a node down here in my palette called input split. Now this isn't a standard node that we supply with a SmartSwarm 341. It's one that I've added, and it's one that you'll be able to add yourselves. So let's go through the process of how do we add additional nodes into the palette to do things that we might want to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where these come from. And these come from a website called flows.nodered.org. This is a community maintained page where there are loads, and I mean loads, of additional nodes that you can download and put onto the gateway to do useful things. A word of warning, Node-RED's designed, amongst other things, to run on PCs, and obviously in the gateway we're in a much more resource constrained device. What that means in terms of all of these nodes is that some of them we're not able to support the installation of. The reason for that is the way Node-RED installs these, it uses a whole load of library calls, and if we had to put all of the libraries in there that would support all of those calls, there'd be no space for any code. So some of these will install, some of them won't. If they don't, it's probably just because they have a library dependency. If it's essential to your process that you have a particular node, give us a call and talk to us. We can always see if we can just install it as a default for you. Anyway, the one that I'm interested in here was that input split. I can do a search here, and I'm actually just going to search for split. And I know that the one I want is this Node-RED contrib input split. If you click into it, you can get some information about what they do. That's how you search around and find stuff that's interesting to you. And I'm just going to copy this bit of text here just to save me typing it. Okay, so if I want to install that into my palette, there are two ways of doing it. I can do it from the local embedded web server. Just let me log in. Okay, and again, I do that through this Node-RED section. But instead of using the firewall that we spoke about later, I'm going to use the Node-RED nodes. That gives me just this piece of this option. And all I need to do is add the name of the node that I want to add into that node name, select the action as install, and hit execute. I'm not going to do it because I've already got it installed, but that's essentially the process. The gateway then goes away. It pulls that node down. Obviously, the gateway has to have an internet connection to do that, and it installs it into the palette. The other way you could do this is from SmartWorks Hub. So SmartWorks Hub is the remote device management and configuration platform that we have for SmartSwarm gateways and also for our smart range of cellular routers. And just let me pull up mine that exists in this demo account of ours. So this is the device that we're talking about. I just know that. If I wanted to download a node from here, and remember now I don't have to physically be on the same site as the device to do this. I can be doing this remotely. I pull up the main page for the device. I go to the Node-RED section, and again here I can just add the name of the node that I want and hit apply changes. If I wanted to uninstall the node, then I can tick the checkbox and apply changes. So that's how the nodes get down. It takes a little bit of time for them to get sent down over the air and for them to install. Some of the nodes, because obviously they're community supported and B&B doesn't have any control over exactly how they're done. Some of the nodes may have some little idiosyncrasies. Some of them, for example, may need you to restart the gateway for them to appear in the palette. Most of them shouldn't, but I know a few do. So that's how you'd get the node down there. Let's go back to our Node-RED page. And essentially then you'd see this input split node appearing in your palette. So I'm going to drag that along. And I'm going to wire our output through to it. Now, you'll remember this red triangle means that this actually needs some configuration before it can do anything, and you'll remember the blue circle means it's not deployed down at the gateway yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up to extract the tempint variable and only pass that through to its output. You'll notice at the moment it hasn't got an output. There's no connection point here that I could wire to. But if I go into it and say, okay, what I'm interested in is message.payload. Payload is one of the attributes of a message. I could be looking at a message topic or something to make a determination. In this case, I'm going to go on the payload and then the field tempint. So by saying message.payload, I'm saying I'm interested in a field that's in this part of the message. And by saying payload.tempint, I'm saying I'm interested specifically in something that's got a label tempint. And I add that in. And if I hit done, you'll see now that I've got an output point here that I can connect to. Out of interest, I can keep doing this. So if I wanted to say I also want to look at the internal battery voltage, then I can go payload.vbat and add that. Done. And now you'll see I've got two output points that I can wire to. So I can use this node to split up the data in in a variety of ways. Also, as you look at this data, you'll notice a number of these are messages that come along that actually don't have anything called tempint inside them. So, for example, this doesn't have a field called tempint. That's fine. When that hits this node, it'll just go nowhere else. So this node essentially says, is there a field called tempint in there? And if so, what's the value? And pass the value out of node 1. So we can see that happening if I put a debug node onto this and stick it onto here. And again, I'll do a deploy. We'll clear out the existing debug stuff. And I'll only put one of these on so you can see what's happening. Okay, so let's wait for a few more to come through. And then we'll analyse what's been going on. Okay, so I'll stop this updating. So now you can see here's a packet that came along. It's an object. It's got a variable of tempint in it, 21.1. And out here, from this node, again, remember we can see which nodes are contributing information as we go down by where the dotted lines are. So out here, I'm now getting just that 21.1 value. You'll see then I've had some packets that have come in that don't have a variable called tempint in them. And then I've got another one here that's come in, and again, we've extracted the number. Note that this, I was going to show you that it was from a different node. Actually, that one wasn't. Let's just run these for a little while. In fact, I don't need to see. Oh, I do. So these are running through. We're going to see data appearing. This node at 232B is actually updating more regularly than all of the other ones that I've got coming through. But sooner or later, we're going to see a set of data packets come from address that isn't this F223B. And then we'll be able to take a look at, there we go, there's one. So let me turn those off. So here we are. Here you can see this device ID is different to this one, but we've had both of the tempint values come through. So here I'm getting any tempint no matter which wizard device it's actually come from. Okay, so let's say we wanted to display that on a dashboard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this gauge widget, gauge node, and I'm going to wire that straight through. And I've got some configuration to do. I've got this triangle. So first thing I need to do, I haven't defined any dashboards at all for this thing. So I'm going to add a new UI group, and I'm going to add that on a new dashboard tab. So let's call this video demo. Add. And I'm going to make it, I've got a choice here of how wide I want it to be in units. The units are kind of arbitrary, but essentially it allows me to then size gauges and charts within the space. So let's say I'm going to set it to 12 wide. It's kind of arbitrary. And let's call it video demo. Add. Okay. So now I'm adding a gauge, and I've got a choice here of whether I let the system decide how big it's going to be. And if I do that, it's going to basically fill the full width of this tab. Or let's say I want it to be a particular size. Let's make it 4x4. Okay. It's going to be a gauge. We're going to call it tempint. The value format is we just want the value of it. The label, we'll call it degrees C. Range 0, and let's say a maximum of 25. I'm in the UK, so 25 is a hot summer's day. And we'll call this internal temperatures. Okay, done. So now if I deploy that, we're now running again. And now I'm going to come to this Node-RED dashboard tab that I've got. And that appears at address 192.168.1.1:1880, but now I have the /UI on the end of it. And that's pulled up a dashboard page. Now you won't see this. This is the dashboard from the other Node-RED that's already running in the gateway. It's some stuff that I have around my house just for demo purposes. But if I come up here, you'll see that we've got this piece called video demo. If you remember, that's the name of the dashboard we created. So if I click on that, you'll see now again I've got a tab called video demo, which is what we called it. I've got a gauge called tempint, and that's running between various values. And the reason it's moving around quite a lot, if you remember, is because we're contributing information from a number of different wizard devices. And so some of them are outside the house, some of them are inside the house, they're in different rooms at different temperatures, so that's why it's moving around. So we've now got our video, our dashboard, and we've got some information on it. Of course, quite often what you're going to be interested in is what the actual long-term trends are, what the graph of these things look like. So let's see how we do that. If I go back to node red, I'm going to pull another node here called chart, and I'm going to wire the temperatures through to the chart node. Again, I need to configure it. It's on the right page. I'm going to select a size for it, and I'm going to make it. The gauge was 4x4, so I'm going to make this 8x4, so it should fit alongside the gauge, given the page is 12 units wide. A line chart is what I want. I don't want it to be a bar chart. I can decide how long I want the data to be collated for here. An hour is fine. I don't need to see hours, minutes and seconds. I'll just look for hours and minutes. Again, I can set my ranges, so 0 to 24. My interpolation, I'm happy with linear, so I just draw straight lines between each measurement point, but obviously if I want it to look a little bit more smooth or rounded, I've got other options here, but linear is fine for me. Legend, I don't want to show. I'm going to say here awaiting data. This field is basically what would appear in place of the chart up until the point where the first sets of data comes along, and we'll call this tempint. Done, and we'll deploy that. So now if I go back to my dashboard, I've got something different now. I've got this chart that's starting to populate. And there's a couple of things that you're going to notice as this happens and as data comes in. And that always takes longer when you're doing demonstrations than in the real world, right? So the first thing is that before, on the gauge, you'll remember I'm seeing the temperatures coming from every one of the nodes, and it just keeps bouncing around all over the place. Whereas here, you'll start to see that I'm actually getting graphs of different values. And as I go along, you'll see data coming in from more and more nodes. So now I've got data from 3 of my 5 nodes coming in. Most of the nodes are publishing once a minute, so that's why it's slow. Other than that, the graph starts building up, and eventually you'll start getting to the point where the graphs build up to the sort of thing I've got on the home demo here. So long-term collated views, gauges that are of particular values rather than all of the values. So that's very quickly how to start moving stuff through into gauges. We'll do some more videos later on how you might start to split out information from particular devices. But go play, have fun.